person on this end if he has any items to bring forth before we get started. Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. No, we do not have any. I think you covered it. Just want to let everyone know this is being recorded, and also just to let you know to mute. And if you're calling in on a cell phone, if you could just mute that, because if we have to mute you on this side, it will be hard to get you unmuted. So we just ask that you go ahead and do those things. And if you have any questions, you can send me a notification in the chat. I'll be glad to assist you. If you do have any buffering issues, you may want to consider, if you have your camera on and you're speaking and you need to have those buffering issues removed, you may want to shut your camera off. But we always enjoy seeing your smiling, warm faces. So with that being said, I'll turn that back over to Mr. Greg Richardson.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, at this point, we're ready to go. And I want to just toss it over to our Secretary Pam Cashwell, here at the North Carolina Department of Administration, where our Commission of Indian Affairs is housed. Secretary Cash.
Thank you, Director Richardson. I appreciate it. I am not going to take but just a couple of minutes because we have a huge agenda for today. If you all have not looked at it, we have so much to cover. And so I just really wanted to say welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being on this call. This is the kickoff of really just a historic time in North Carolina, with the funds that will be going out to tribes and tribal organizations. And so spending these funds will be a tall order. And unfortunately, as you all will learn today, when the federal government gives you funds, they'd like to put, I know many of you know this already because you receive lots of federal grant dollars, but my goodness, there are lots of responsibilities that come with that. And so I'm grateful to our NC Pro partners who are part of our Office of State Budget and Management, because they are just doing a phenomenal job across the board with all of these grant dollars that the state has been receiving and putting out. And so I'm so grateful to Stephanie, David, the entire team who has been working with us to just really get this program developed, and so that we can get these funds out as quickly as possible. So with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Chairman Burnett, our chair of the Commission of Indian Affairs, for a few remarks so we can get ourselves rolling down this agenda. Thank you all for being with us. Chairman Burnett, you have the floor. And if you're talking, you must be on mute.
There you go. Is it on? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And let me say, we want to thank you and your wonderful staff, and also Greg Richardson, our Executive Director, and the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs for being able to put this together for our tribe to come together, and we can get this valuable information so that we can take and be able to move forward and assist our people. So again, I don't have a lot to say, but we welcome everyone. We thank you that you're here, and we just look forward that we can take and do what is best for our people. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to, is it Greg?
Okay, we're going to go now to Mr. Dante Cesario. We invited him to this meeting. He is the tribal administrator for the Saponi, and he's also the CEO for the National Congress of American Indians. And I must say that he played a great role in terms of helping us to get to where we are today. So he might have had a conflict. So we're going to go on to Stephanie McGrath.
No, there. I'm here, Greg.
Ah, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. Okay, there you go.
I am here, and thanks for the introduction. I do want to say before I get started, it's good to see Chairman John Lowry at the table there. I believe that's him. John, very proud of you. Proud to call you chairman. Congratulations. And just want to jump into a couple of things and maybe read a couple of things. I don't want David or Stephanie getting mad at me from the state, so I want to make sure I get this right. But they have been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to get to this meeting, And I just want to let you all know why I'm here. So in my role at NCAI and a prior role with a different organization, we worked really closely with the Department of Treasury and the White House in trying to implement the funds for the $20 billion that went out to the federally recognized tribes. So from the far reaches of the Alaska Native villages to the more significant population tribes in Oklahoma, they all had really different needs. And we were in the center of trying to figure out what compliance would look like, what guidance would look like, eligibility in certain cases. And that money has gone out, and the CARES money has gone out before that. So we've been successful in trying to work that through. In this case, what I wanted to just focus on is just to give a little bit of background of where we are with this money. So this is part of the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. And that's part of the bigger funding of the American Rescue Plan, which is a $350 billion state, local, and tribal government fund that went out across the country in response for the COVID-19 public health emergency. The program ensures that governments have the resources needed to, and I want to bring up these three areas because they're really important for all funding. For one, to fight the pandemic and support families and businesses struggling with the public health and economic impacts of the emergency. Number two, to maintain vital public services even amid declines in revenue. And number three, build a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery by making investments that support long-term growth and opportunity. So regardless of what government you are, those are the three things that is the ultimate aim of this funding, to mitigate the impacts and to look forward and to be able to recover and make investments and take care of economic impacts. So in the latest Carolina budget, we have $10 billion that's been appropriated to tribes, and it's been approved by the General Assembly, signed into law by the governor. And in a lot of ways, the funding that is coming to tribal governments and the local governments in Carolina is similar to the federal program in that those three objectives are still in place. And it's also similar in that it's discretionary money, which means that the leaders in the state and to a certain extent, the local and tribal governments will determine the best use of funds according to the needs of their respective communities. And that's a really important component. But it's also where the similarities end. The state guidelines for the broad use of funds, not the federal government, will be the authority. So the state is working what implementation looks like, and they already have a really helpful website that has a lot of good information. And I know that Stephanie and David are going to be talking about that from the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office. What I want to stress, given that backdrop and given that it won't do any good to look at how tribes on the federal level receive this funds on the Treasury website, our focus is all on North Carolina Pandemic Office. That's the main thing we want to stress today in working with our partners here from the state. But also, I want to stress that it was incredibly helpful for the tribes on the federal level to be able to get together themselves and talk through some of these issues that are very unique to tribes that we need to bring up to the states. And included in some of those, after this rolls out and after we hear some of the things that the state is going to talk about for implementation purposes, we're all going to have questions on what's the best use of the money, what can we do with it, what does compliance look like? And I know the question is going to come up after today on how are we doing our population? And we should be getting together as tribes to be able to talk those things through and hopefully be able to act in a united way for bringing these issues to the state and also being good partners in compliance and things like that. And that's really, I think, a role that we can play at NCAI and coordinate with Greg Richardson to be able to make sure that we become good stewards of the money, get all these questions out between us, and work together to make sure that we have a fair implementation, a fair eligibility for the funds. The other piece before I go is I really want to thank the state for, when we first had this meeting, we were really on uncertain grounds. Will they come through with their promises? In North Carolina, as tribes, we don't often get these opportunities. There's a lot of talk that goes into this, but seeing the state come through, seeing the governor come through, and then also seeing this implementation team here, really want to work with tribes and make this successful. I think it's really important for all of us, and we do want to share our gratitude for having you all come to the table, and also the gratitude for actually following up, finishing, and signing this into law. And we're excited, I know at Saponi, to be able to work with the state to roll this out. We're going to be going into planning shortly in the next week or so to be able to start talking this through with our communities. And that's when I think a lot of questions will start to come up for all of us. So I want to be engaged as a representative of our tribe, and also to offer any resources on some of the lessons that we've learned on the federal level. And believe me, there were a lot of them. So this never goes as smoothly as we want, but we just coming together helps us to work all these out. So thank you, Stephanie and David, for giving me some time to go over that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dante. We'll go right to Stephanie now, the Executive Director for NC Pro.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm Stephanie Maguire. I'm the Executive Director for the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office. We also go by the acronym NC Pro. And we are here to go over with you the steps in the process and, commit to working with you to make this as pain-free as we can make it. I know that, as Secretary Cashwell said, when you have federal funds, there are a lot of strings attached. So we can't make it totally pain-free, but we will do our best to work with you and make this process easy, as easy as we can. And, just wanted to let you know that we're going to introduce our team a little bit later in the meeting so that you know exactly who to call and you know exactly who to reach out to, and you have phone numbers and you have emails, and we're here to help you. So don't worry about calling us. We will, and emailing us whenever you need help. That's what we're here for.
Thank you, Stephanie. I can tell everybody here on the phone that over the past couple of weeks, a lot of effort's been put into trying to make sure that we get this meeting together. So I want to say it again, hearty thank you to all of you for stopping and taking time out of your schedule to be part of this meeting today. I view this as a very historic meeting, and I know that we are standing on the shoulders of a lot of people who worked hard to make sure that here in North Carolina, our American Indians get to the point where we would be able to decide our own destinies, to apply for grant funds, and also to have a government-to-government relationship between our tribes and this state. And I believe we've accomplished that. So I know that our forefathers are smiling today to see this coming together. I know that when I started out in this business, it was highly unusual for our tribes or our Indian Commission to have more than just $100,000, and in some cases $10,000 to administer in terms of bringing services to our communities. So today we have all of our tribes represented here, I believe. We have the Coharie, Palawa Saponi, the Lumbee, Meherrin, Occaneechi, Saponi, Waccamaw, Siouan, and then we have the associations, the Cumberland County Association, Beaufort Native American Association, Metrolina Native American Association, and the Triangle Native American Society. We chose today to bypass any formal introductions in terms of tribal leaders, because the goal today is to get really down to the business of understanding how this money is going to be administered in North Carolina. The Commission of Indian Affairs here, we are only a facilitator. We are not involved with the administration of the funds. I hope that no one is interpreting that we're trying to intercede in anything at all with these funds. But the main goal is to make sure that we get everybody to the table, we introduce everybody, and then like a good family, we're working together in harmony from that point forward. So at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Stephanie and Mr. David Williams. I think at this point, you all can take over and let's talk about the partners and introductions of you all's staff, NPRO staff overviews, legislation, and everything. So let's move right on into that, if that's okay. Stephanie?
That sounds fine. Can y'all see that slide that I tried to share with you? Okay, I'm getting some head nods. Good. Okay, so we're going to go over the legislation, introduce our team, talk about the templates and the information that we'll need from you, the funding agreement, what we go through in terms of an agreement to be able to administer your funds to you or disperse your funds, reporting, and then we'll have some Q&A. We were able to come up with some what we think is a designation for the tribes in terms of being a beneficiary or beneficiaries, which I think will make hopefully administration of these funds much, much easier for you. So we'll talk about that a little bit later too. That's sort of the newest information that we have, what may not have been shared earlier. So as you may recall, and also I should just say, stop me at any time, raise your hand, raise your hand, their little hand on Teams, however, whatever you need to do if you have a question. I'm happy to stop and I'd rather answer questions as you have them than you don't have to wait till the end. So this is the corrected language from how this money from the state fiscal recovery funds was appropriated, and you can see the legislation reference at the top. So we have $715,285 to each of the following tribes. And then we split that $4 million between those 7 tribes based on a per capita, which Dante was talking about earlier. We think this is going to be much, much easier for you administratively if we give you one disbursement instead of multiple disbursements. It'll just be easier to track. It'll be easier to report on. And the federal government can make reporting very difficult. So our goal is to get the information that we need from all 7 tribes so that we can go ahead and disperse the funds in one payment, make the calculation, disperse the funds, and it'll just be easier all the way around. The next is that each of the following organizations, the associations, are getting $250,000. So that is what we're working with. And we think the corrected language as a grant, making this granted, will make you beneficiaries, which means there's a lot easier requirements than there would have been otherwise for you. So first, I want to make sure we introduce the team. I'm the director of NC Pro. David Howard, who hopefully will wave at you now, is our deputy director, and he's going to talk a little bit later. Laura Jimenez is our primary contact. So Laura is the person that you will call first when you have any questions. Then she'll bring me David, Jamila, who's our secondary contact on here as well. Anytime she needs you need our help. So if you get nothing else out of this presentation, write down Laura's email and her phone number. And Laura, I can't see you, but hopefully you're waving. Laura's wonderful. She's been doing this work for a long time with NC Pro. She's phenomenal. She's patient. She's just the best at helping people through this. And I now see that we're getting, some people can't see the screen. I'm not sure how to fix that.
I think it's on their side, Stephanie.
Okay.
It's up.
Okay. I'm sorry, we will send these slides out afterwards too. So that way you can get Laura's phone number. So I wanted to give you just a brief overview of the process. Now, brief is 8 steps. It's okay, Cody, no problem. I'd rather you ask me the questions as we have them. Brief is the process, you know, when you're dealing with the federal government. So we are going to share templates with you, and we are going to set up individual meetings. And the purpose of the template, which we'll get to in a few slides, is really to get you started, get some contact information that we need, get some ideas of how you're going to spend the funds and what you're going to use them for, because we will have to report that back to Treasury. So the next step will be, after we meet with you, we'll answer questions, and don't worry, we've met with a lot of state agencies and others at this point. Secretary Cashwell, Mr. Elliott have been through this process, so they can tell you what it's like. We try to make it as pain-free as possible. You'll return those the template. I'm not actually sure that we need budget projections. We might not need that from you guys, but you'll at least return your template to us. We will process these documents. We have some processes that we have to go through on the back end to be able to pay you. And then we will put together a funding agreement. We'll send that to you unless you need it in another format through email via DocuSign. And what you'll do is have the appropriate person that you tell us is allowed to sign for your tribe or for your organization, and we will get that signature, and then on our end the state budget director Charlie Peru signs it, and then that all happens electronically. So that covers steps 3 and 4. We have a system called Pangram, which is actually an SAP based system for grants management, and we'll set up your account in there, so we have your account information. When we send you the money, we know what account to send it to. We know who's responsible, that sort of thing. And then we will show you how to request your payment through that portal. Again, we're here to help you, so don't be intimidated by it. I can use the portal, and I had to have the portal training class earlier in it, and it's pretty intuitive. So I think we're here to help you. We'll help you work on that. Next, you'll get your funds, and then this is the key thing. You need to have your funds obligated by December 31st, 2024. So Treasury, the U.S. Treasury has dictated what they think obligation means. It means having a grant agreement in place or a contract. And then the funds have to be expended by December 31st, 2026. So you have plenty of time, but we just are here to help make sure you meet those deadlines, make sure everything goes smoothly. And then you will complete your report on the use of funds and return them to us. There are certain reports that we have to fill out for Treasury that we are aware of right now. And there are certain reports that we'll have to fill out for the legislature that we don't know what they're going to be yet. And with the same with the state auditor. We got some questions after the fact for coronavirus relief funds. So just know that we have some visibility into the reporting requirements, but not all of the visibility. And, you know, again, we welcome your feedback. We welcome your thoughts on it, and we will work together on that reporting as we go forward. So think of this as a 4-year partnership. So the project planning template, which is the template that is referred to in steps 1 and 2, is really it's for these purposes. We collect information on the projects funded with state fiscal recovery funds. So U.S. Treasury refers to everything as a project. So each tribe will have a project, each tribal organization will have a project, and it helps organizations really think through how they're going to use these funds. It also will get contact information that, you know, whether you target an economically disadvantaged community. For our purposes, I think we can count under federal and state law that that these are all, you're all considered to be economically disadvantaged communities under the law, and that, you know, we think about what your goals are and how you're going to meet those and how you're going to measure it. And we'll do that individually. It's just easier. We talked about doing it on this call, but it really is easier because different people have different questions and different organizations have different needs. So the next step, you will be hearing from Laura Jimenez on your meeting, and we'll be working with Greg, or we already have the information from Greg on who we will contact initially. And then we'll set up the meeting, go through the template with you, fill out the information that we need. So after we get that, we use the information from that form in part to develop the funding agreement. It basically covers the purpose of the state fiscal recovery funds. It can look intimidating at first, and John Williams, who's our attorney, is on this call, and I've given him a little bit of a hard time about how long he's made it. But to his credit, the funding agreement is very much a reference document. So it really makes you aware of the things that you need to think about in using these state fiscal recovery funds. And the beautiful part of it is you don't have to go click on a bunch of links. I don't know about y'all, but when I get an email and there's like 80 links in there, I don't always click on them and read the links. So John has put it together in a handy kind of user reference guide for this. And again, we have determined that the tribes are beneficiaries under federal and state rules, which should vastly reduce the administrative burden that you would have. There will be some reporting requirements, but you should not have to do any monitoring. And again, we hope to make this much, much, much easier for you. I'm actually going to turn it over to John to make sure he can address the resolutions and the 501c3 information, because there may be some technical parts there that I'm not as familiar with. John, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. Thank you, Stephanie. Good to see everyone today. It's really pretty straightforward from a legal standpoint. When we issue these checks, we need to basically know how the money is going to flow. My understanding is that most, if not all of you, have a charter or a constitution that describes how your council operates, how the chair or the chief is chosen, and who actually has the authority to enter into agreements on behalf of the tribe. And then I also understand that most or all of you, when you're receiving grant funds to do things, you actually use a 501c3 entity, which is separate as the entity that actually deals with any payroll taxes, withholding, hires contractors, whatever work needs to be done. So we just have to make sure that we have the right legal structure for the right signature to appear, and the resolution saying that you want the money to flow through your 501c3. So we'll work that language out as we execute each agreement, and that way we'll have a great audit trail forevermore. Whenever anyone ever comes and says, who got the check, how did it get deposited, and who had authority to spend it, we have all those answers on file.
And John, we got a question in the chat about whether or not the funding agreements will be the same for the tribes and the urban organizations. Can you speak to that, please?
Yes, it will. The agreement is pretty generic, and it basically is a section. Different sections reference all the possible standards and regulations that apply. So we're using one template. That doesn't mean each one applies to each thing that you're doing. So it'll be one standard template subaward agreement to sign.
Thank you. So if you're looking at our, and yes, we will make the recording of this call available to everyone. So thank you for asking that question also. Good question. If you're looking at your agenda, you'll notice that number 5 on our agenda was monitoring, but because we are going to designate you as beneficiaries, and we think we can do that under the rules, you will not have to do monitoring. So you can check that off your list. That is a huge win. We are very excited about that. And I hope that will be beneficial. The last thing, go ahead.
Can you just explain that a little bit more? I think that's a really important difference. So if you could just elaborate on that.
I would love to. So if you are considered a subrecipient, which means you are carrying out a duty on behalf of the state of North Carolina, then you are subject to additional requirements. And probably the most difficult one is monitoring. And what that means is if you were to give the funds not to a contractor, but to another organization, you would have to go in and put a process in place to make sure that that organization, you would have to have an MOU or an MOA with them. You would have to make sure they are not on the federal debarment list. You would have to make sure they don't have any conflicts of interest. You would have to make sure they are are using the funds for what they're supposed to be using them for, and you follow up with them on a regular basis. Have them turn in receipts, have them verify that, like, say if they were to build a playground structure, just to make up a random example, that they actually went in and built the playground structure. And it's really a lot of administrative requirements. It usually, we are personally at NC Pro going through this right now with our monitoring and setting things up. It requires a lot of people. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of effort. It requires a lot of systems. And then the key thing then, what we've gotten dinged for is you have to go through and document everything you've done. So you just have to keep extensive records. By making you as a beneficiary, designating you as beneficiaries, what that means is that the state is granting you this money. So they are giving it to you because you are helping the people of your tribes, and you will then have minimal guidance, minimal compliance requirements, and you will not have to do any monitoring. What's unclear to us at this point, you won't have to do federal reporting because federal reporting only requires us to do like one-time reporting. But we think that given the General Assembly's desire to probably track this money and see what it's been used for, there will likely be some state reporting where we come back and talk to you about how you use the funds and what you did with them, and if there's any way to measure the outcomes of it. And, we're here to help you with the measurement and things like that. But Dante, I hope that's a good enough explanation. I don't know if you have other things from your perspective that are really positive about beneficiary.
No, that is great. And that it goes along with the reduced administrative burden. So we really appreciate that, or we will appreciate that. Thank you.
So Stephanie, this is Tony Hayes. How are you today? So basically what I'm hearing you say is that we're going to report out like we do on some of the grants that we have based on the conditions that the state will put on it as far as the reporting component, but there will be no ongoing monitoring for the tribe itself. It's just us reporting out how we use the money, whether it's we sent the money to X number or X entity or this entity or whatever we've used the money for. That's what I'm hearing you say, correct?
That is correct.
Fantastic.
As an organization that struggles with capacity and struggles to manage the $11 billion in federal funds that we're managing, we know how hard that is. And to the extent that we were able to make this ruling, we're very happy about it.
Well, I'll speak for my tribe, and I know a lot of the other tribes pretty well. One of the things that we're not rich on is human capital as far as resources to do this kind of stuff. And so for us to be able to do all of that administrative stuff, I would hate to spend the money in trying to go out and contract with someone or have to hire someone to do, a bunch of redundant and laborious monitoring type stuff.
I agree. You can focus on planning the best use of this funds for your people and what you think will make the biggest difference. And you don't have to worry about the monitoring and all the administrative headaches.
Thank you. That's almost as exciting as receiving the money.
No worries. It's except for reporting. So I just have to say that caveat because I know we're going to get asked about reporting. So we want to be able to come back and say, this is what the tribes did with this money, and isn't that phenomenal? And what a difference they made for their people. So I hope that leads us, thank you, those great questions, because that leads me to my last slide, which is we are going to come up with reporting templates as we get additional information. It's just not really clear right now. The federal government has put together some guidelines, but we don't think as beneficiaries most of those will apply. So now we have to figure out on the state side what we think will be asked. So that's more to come, and we are thinking through it now. So I think it's important, and I know it's been important for us, as you're putting things in place and as you're thinking about how you're going to roll out the use of these funds, to think about it up front, what you're going to track and what you're going to measure, just so you have a chance to measure it. It's much easier to try to measure it if you think about it up front than it is at the end. So that's what we're going to try to do.
This is Tony again, and I apologize, but I want to be as crystal clear as I can be today before we have our one-on-ones or whatever. Can you go back and talk a little bit about the delegation and the expenditures of the funds? I want to know more about what that really means, because in federal lingo, delegate may mean one thing, and to me, it may mean something totally different. So could you elaborate on that just a bit?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if you back up in your slide, it was the
Okay.
funds were going to be delegated by 2024, and
Oh,
obviously, I know what expenditures by 2026 means, but I just want to understand what that delegation incorporates.
Yes, I see now what you're talking about. Step 7, the tribe has to obligate funds by December 31st, 2024. In federal lingo, what that means is that you have to know the purpose of how you're using it. And you have to have, I just got this definition from our consultants the other day. You have to know that you have a grant agreement or contract in place that makes it obligated. Now, it could get easier because we are trying to categorize this. This is getting a little too into the weeds, but we're trying to categorize this money as revenue replacement in addition to beneficiaries.
Right.
And we're not quite sure yet how obligation under the Treasury rules will apply to revenue replacement. That's not clear. But we think for the most part, if you have, like, say you are going to buy something that you're going to contract for with some of this money, you need to have that contract in place by December 31st, 2024.
Okay, but there will be further updates on the obligatory situation here.
There will be. We are, unfortunately, it's not completely clear yet how that definition of obligated is going to apply to revenue replacement. We're hoping what it'll mean is that you don't have to worry about it, but we don't have that confirmation yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions that anyone has? These are great questions. Okay, well, I am going to turn it over now to David Howard for some discussion items.
Oh, yes, actually just reintroducing something that Dante spoke about earlier, and that is talking about the second appropriation that you saw for $4 million. As Dante alluded, and you saw it when Stephanie went over the legislation, that is supposed to be done per capita, which is somewhat defined as your membership or population. One of the things that is clear to us after taking all the advice that we've had from so many of you guys is that, as Dante shared, that is something that we probably should leave it to the 7 tribes to talk amongst yourselves about the way to approach that. So what I'm gonna do, well, Dante, I was gonna turn it over to you right now, but you kind of said it earlier, so I won't do it again. But do you want to add anything about the guys working together?
Yeah, thanks, David. I just wanted to express how there was 2 different formulas used on the federal level. The first was a housing formula that didn't really work well for all tribes. And it was a lesson learned from the federal government trying to determine tribal populations, and it didn't go over that well. And as governments, we have the ability to certify our own populations, which we should be doing. We all know what our enrollment numbers are, so we all should be able to come up with that. I just want to go back to strongly suggesting, that Greg and I can pull together a meeting and we can talk about this amongst ourselves on what the certification looks like. I think I don't want to speak for David here, but from the state side of this, having that certification is going to be necessary for compliance purposes on their end. So it's really important that we get together ourselves and determine what that population number looks like. So we'll try to organize around that and make things easy. So we have the resolution certifying how the money should be received in the nonprofit or directly to the government. And then the second piece to this would be our certification for population, which is going to be amongst, up to us to figure that out amongst ourselves. I don't think it'll be that difficult, but we should have that conversation amongst the tribal leaders to be able to make that determination. So that would be my suggestion.
And I'll tell you how it would be nice to work out, and then we can take comments from you guys to tell us if you see it differently. It'd be nice for you all to have the meeting that Dante just spoke about, and then maybe within the next 2 weeks, if we could actually get the self-certifications from each one of the tribes in some type of correspondence. John, I think, is email okay, or do we need something more formal?
As long as we know basically that whoever is sending the email has the authority to speak for the tribe, tribal administrator,
The
council chair,
chief,
whoever.
the chair, whoever's appropriate.
Yep.
And then, because what Stephanie said earlier is the goal, which is to do one payment. So as you know, just to walk through what the legislature said, the $715 or so $1,000 is actually already decided. The 4 million and how it is divvied up is the last part of it. And what we like to do is do one agreement that includes both each tribe. So the sooner the better is what I think we've all been trying to say. So,
And that
any
can go to
questions
Laura.
on,
And
sorry.
that correspondence can go to Laura, so it's part of the main file for each one, since she'll be compiling everything.
So this is that time when I want to open it up for questions about this to see if there's any concerns. And if not, that's the approach that we will take. So any concerns from anybody?
Mr. Howard.
Yes, sir.
Ray Jacobs, Waccamaw.
Yes, sir.
Would the census numbers be able to certify the tribe?
I think that's one of the things, to be honest with you, I wanted you all to talk amongst yourselves. And if that's what you agree on, then that's the way we'll go. But I've heard that there's some concerns about undercounting and some other things. So with the census numbers. So I think, again, we wanted to leave it up to you all to talk through and to come to some conclusions. And if that's what you guys come to and that's what you send us, that's what we'll use.
Just as a comment on that, Mr. Jacobs, I think it's important that if we are going to go that route, that we all use the same numbers, so that we're all kind of part of the same equitable system. So if that's what everybody agrees to, it won't work as much in our case because of the way the census is taken up there on the borderline. But that's part of the conversation we should have is census, enrollment, or other that we can talk through.
Hey, Dante, Tony, how you doing, buddy?
Hi, Tony.
Good. Listen, the one thing that I would sort of offer, or at least throw out there, is I think all's fair game as far as the certification, with the exception of opening up our actual tribal roles. We just that's a problem for me, and I think it's probably going to be problematic for the other tribes as well.
So both Greg and I expressed that concern, Tony, and I don't believe there's any movement at all towards opening up our roles. In just looking at us either as the government certifying a number and being consistent on that, or using another indicator that Mr. Jacobs had raised. So that's where I think things are right now. But always, always good to raise that.
Tony, you hadn't heard, I made sure not to say we needed your enrollment. We just need you to self-certify your number, whatever method you plan to use.
Outstanding. Thank you.
David,
Yes.
Dante, Ugly Tree Richardson, hello, Chief, Hallowasaponi Indian Tribe. As I have listened to how we might be able to share in the 4 million in some areas, I have a concern. It has to do with certifying our roles, using those numbers versus the census data. And for me, this is something that I would need to share or discuss with our board or our tribal council. Thank you.
I think you all understand why we're being sensitive about this is because we don't want to be pulled into the middle. We want you guys to all agree on whatever method is appropriate. Any other questions, thoughts?
This is Danny,
Yes.
Danny Bell, and I was wondering about tribally enrolled members that live in urban communities. And are they part of that per capita in some way?
So if I can, David, so there's two different things going on here. The nonprofits serve Native population. There might be food bank or other services that you're going to provide for that population, or rides to get vaccinated and things like that. The tribes have other things that we're going to be planning, and it seems to be that's the way this has fallen out for some of the funds on the federal level. Those individual natives are served by some of the programs, but there's a really focus on the urban Indian organizations to focus on the needs of those community members away from their tribal communities. The tribal communities are going to be planning out those impacts that we talked about before. What's the economic impact? How are we coming out of this in a better place than looking at some of the other mitigation for the community? There's two different, in my impression, it's how it's played out. There's two different objectives here for how that money gets distributed. So the organizations are, the short answer is yes, they may be counted twice, but they are and you all serve other natives. So it's not the same thing. Our resources probably need to be concentrated on the tribal side to fund these larger initiatives, and you all are focusing on the individuals away from home.
Dante, the only thing I would add to that is that we are not required to get enrollment numbers from the nonprofits. So we're not counting there at all. It just goes to those nonprofits.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
This is, yes, this is Jonathan Caudle, Chief of the Maharan. When you're talking about per capita, are you talking about our tribal citizens, or the number of people in the community that is Maharan, even though they may have been terminated from the tribe?
Again, I think that's a family conversation. I think, Dante, that is part of what I think he was saying you guys need to get together and talk about.
Yeah, Chief Puddle, if you don't mind, let's get together and just talk about all of this, and we can come up with something that's going to be consistent. I think it would be worth bringing up all these things so we can talk about it.
Great.
Any other comments or concerns? All right, I'm gonna keep going then. All right, so again, the goal would be to do one payment, and if it is all possible, to let us know in the next couple of weeks. It'll just make it faster for us to get you the funds. So not a deadline as much as just a goal of helping to get the funds out and a whole number to you for what the whole legislation calls for. Stephanie or John, anything else on that before I move on? Okay. All right. So the only other thing I wanted to share is just kind of some next steps. And I should also point out that Jamela Hawkins, who's on our call, who handles communications for NC Pro, her and her team have putting together a page on our website that will be devoted to just information needed for the funding for the tribes. We're very serious about providing you the technical assistance that you need, regardless of how this works. And she just put it in the chat so you could see it. Also, we thought it would be nice to pull this larger group together again, if needed. And we wanted to hear from you guys how often you thought that would be needed. I doubt So just so you know, we already as a team, us being DOA and NC Pro, have started meeting weekly to talk through what we need to do to facilitate supporting you all. So that you should know. And Secretary Cashwell as well has committed to a monthly meeting with us to kind of talk through what we're doing. But I wanted to know how often you guys wanted to be brought together. I don't know if it's a quarter, it's twice, maybe 6 months from now, so we can just revisit where everybody is. But I wanted to throw that option out to the floor so you didn't feel like we were doing this one and done. We're happy to keep these conversations going. So any thoughts on that?
Yes. This is Jonathan Caudle again from the chief of the Maharan. Initially, starting off until we get the ball rolling, I think it should be more frequent than less frequent, at least quarterly to begin with. That's my opinion. Thanks.
That's what we were thinking. So unless somebody says something different, that's what we will shoot for. I mean, we got 7 meetings to do with all of you guys right away. So, I mean, those are going to take some time. So, 3 months from now is probably a good time to kind of pull everybody back together. And then you can decide if you want to do it again from there. All right. Unless somebody says something different, that's what I'm writing down. Okay. The next thing is that I just wanted to let you guys know, because we're taking technical assistance pretty serious, very serious, we will plan to do visits sometime along the way. We need to get completely past some of the issues with masks and the virus itself, on the pandemic itself. But we do want to come out and actually do some visits. And again, not for monitoring, but just to kind of come visit, provide technical assistance and be helpful. And we may or may not, as this goes on, do some listening sessions while we're out too, just to kind of hear what the concerns are, to make sure that, we're keeping up with where things are going with the pandemic and the impact. So the only other thing I want to do is officially, before I turn it back over to Stephanie and Secretary Cashwell to close us out, is thank you, Greg. I think I saw that we had almost 50 people a little while ago. So thank you for helping us facilitate this. This is the result of about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 conversations with me and Greg and all of us over the last month. So Greg, thank you for your work. And I think we're going to be on your agenda for your commission meeting as well. Stephanie, I volunteered you, by the way. So Stephanie will be on the agenda to kind of share where we've gone with this call and what we've gotten done by the time the commission meets. So with that, Stephanie, I'll turn it back over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you, David. And thanks, everybody. These are great questions. I hope the information is clear. I did send the slides to everybody on the call, and I think Greg has recorded the meeting, so we'll get the recording out as well. Thank you, Greg and Secretary Cashwell and your whole team for all the help you've provided to us. And we really look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and your team. I tell you, you all are really good to work with. And I wanted to say that because if any of the tribal leaders have any reservations here, please just put them to the side, because you really don't have to worry about that. And then finally, before I turn it back to Secretary Cashwell, Dante, can you and I maybe and David and Stephanie touch base about the follow-up meeting? I made a note just glancing over the commission calendar right quick. We have some breaks in there if we get breaks, Madam Secretary. But the week of March the 1st through the 4th, or March 8th to the 10th. And I think you all heard the urgency that David and Stephanie was putting out there to us. So they're going to be looking to us to maybe get some decision made on this allocation pretty quick. So if it's okay with you all, then I will work directly with Dante, David, and Stephanie, and then we'll send that information out like we normally do to our tribal leaders and ask them if there's any conflicts with the dates and times that we select. Is that okay?
Sounds great.
Secretary, you get the final word.
Thank you all so much. Greg, thank you so much. I want you all to know that Director Richardson is, he works hard and is constantly advocating for you all and for how things need to be done to ensure that everyone is around the table. He is very intentional about that. And sometimes I'm trying to move fast and he tells me, you got to slow down because you know how our people are. We got to give time to get everybody to the table. So just know that he is working hard for you to ensure that we are very intentional about ensuring that all of you are around the table at once. And this is a great crowd today. This is evidence of that. We were trying to do it a little bit earlier and he said, nope, we got to push it off so that we give people enough time to get it on their calendar and have everybody there all at the same time. So thank you to everyone for your participation. Thank you, NC Pro. You all have probably figured out on this call that we are partners with them and work very closely with them. And they have been so excellent about just really, when we've raised questions, doing research on that. John Williams, who is their general counsel, lots of legal questions that we raise. And John is always very good about finding us an answer for that. Dante, thank you for being on today as well. Appreciate your good counsel and looking forward to all of you getting together, to all of the tribes getting together to work through this certification process. And this is all good work. Thank you, everybody, and have a great evening.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Stephanie and David.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Dante, take care. I'll be in touch, Dante.
That makes you nervous.